In my late 60s, I decided to stop the dreaming and go ahead and do what I had wanted to do for many years, and that was to start my own business. And in starting my own business, I knew there were going to be some things that I had to do, and one of them was the branding.
Welcome back to another episode of Growthpreneurs. Joining us is a trailblazer who has not only shattered ceilings, but has paved pathways for countless others. Dr. Geneva J Williams is someone whose accolades and achievements are not just impressive, but that I admire, and I'm sure that you admire as well. Dr. Geneva broke barriers by becoming the first Black woman executive leader of the United Way of Metropolitan Detroit. And if you think that's where her impact ends, you're in for a special surprise. She's also the brilliant mind behind City Connect Detroit and the visionary who brought together figure skating in Detroit, a transformative leadership development program for young girls. Her journey even led her to win Miss Black Fit and Fine at the age of 69. Dr. Geneva's expertise is more than just she's held and has programs come to life through money raising initiatives. So she has raised, and I want you to listen very closely, she has helped initiatives raise more than $100 million for charitable causes, crafting over 50 public-private partnerships, and leading both vast organizations and nimble startups. I really admire her. For me, she's a beacon of what's possible, and especially when it comes to raising that $100 million. Dr. Geneva, thank you for coming to the podcast.
I am just super excited to be here. Thank you so much. That was a fabulous introduction. It took me back, and I kept saying to myself, wow, yeah, I did do all that.
Yes, you did. And we're gonna, and you did more, right? You met the love of your life, and you both, it was kind of, we'll get into that, like love at first sight.
Yes.
You're a mother, and
and grandmother.
And a grandmother?
5.
Wow, and a grandmother.
Yes, my youngest just had twins a year ago.
Wow, a grandma of twins.
Yes.
And more than that, you also mentor women in high power positions so that they can make an impact in their nonprofits, in their organizations. And so your impact trickles through that. But before we even start the title of today's talk, and you chose the title, The Red Penguin. So what is that Red Penguin philosophy? What does it mean for people listening who may not know?
Well, Shanee, a couple of years ago, a very good friend of mine asked me to help his niece, Sandy, with her science project on penguin. Now, I wasn't really interested in, but I wanted to do my friend this favor. And so I spent more time than I would ever have known that I would spend learning about penguin. And we would read, we'd go online, we'd talk about it, and we'd watch shows, the National Geographic show. And one day when we were watching one of the shows, I looked over and I saw she was halfway asleep. And Sandy, you're supposed to be watching this. She said, well, it's kind of boring. She said, they all there, they just standing there, they all look alike, they're all in black and white and everything. She said, and says, that's not keeping me awake and interested. I said, listen, girl, you got to get into this. And it made me think, well, what would make a difference in that? And I said to her, you know what? What if a red penguin just popped up right there? What would you think? She looked at me, she laughed, she started laughing. She said, that was something. And we started talking back and forth. And I realized how, what had just happened and how true that was. That if a red penguin had entered left stage into all of the surrounding black and white penguins, that everybody would notice. You'd jump up, you'd probably grab your phone, take a picture, you'd certainly post it, you'd tell others about it, and it would be really something. And it just occurred to me that what a just a vivid analogy about differentiation and personal branding and what a difference it would make to stand out among the others, particularly today when there's so much noise going on, the standing out and being a red penguin. And as I said, I learned more about penguins than I ever wanted to know. And one of the interesting things about them is that they molt. They go through a molting process, which is they shed their feathers, their skin once a year, and then grow back a new coat, particularly this is a waterproof coating, and you imagine they're all this water and ice, and they have to do it to survive every year. And I thought about how that behavior really mimics what we have to do as entrepreneurs and executives who want to make impact and to, create our personal brand, that every year or in some frequency, we need to shed the old and get back the new. And all of that is part of that personal branding process. So ever since then, I've used this analogy to work with leaders, to share with those who want to differentiate themselves and really get into why it's important and what it really is. So that's how it came about and how I brought it in and developed it in my thinking and teaching and inspiring about personal brand.
Going into your childhood, Dr. Geneva, how did your childhood influence you to be that red penguin? Because it takes courage. Most people are afraid to be a red penguin.
Well, I grew up in a small town on the Jersey Shore, right where the ocean, I could step out my door in the morning, take a deep breath and smell the salt air. It was wonderful. And my sister and I used to always feel that the adults in the community went away and had meetings on us because they were always in our business. They knew everything about us. They would ask us constant questions, how you doing in school? What are your grades? Are you in Girl Scouts? All these questions. And then they would always know all our business. And I'm not just talking about our family and friends, but the janitor in the school and the woman who ran the candy store. Everybody was all in our business and was always asking questions. And, it was such that my sister and I used to think it was a conspiracy. And when I later on in life, I discovered that, yes, it was a conspiracy, a caring community, a conspiracy, folk care. And along with them, my mom and dad were civil rights activists. Now, they were ordinary people. My mom was a school teacher and my dad was a government worker. They had a deep commitment to making sure that the doors of opportunity were open for everyone. And they concentrated in housing and education and employment and made some major change in our small community. And then my dad in particular decided that he was going to make the biggest change of all when he went to buy a home for the first time. And he had been back from being in the service, and it was the GI Bill time, and everybody had the money to do this. And he went to buy a home and was told that we don't sell homes to Negroes. And that statement and that denial of opportunity led him and my mom to fight for 3 years, taking it through all kinds of courts, finally to the Supreme Court of New Jersey, where he won a unanimous decision. And they told the realtor to build Mr. Jones his home. And back then, again, this is
he never gave up.
13, 14, this is back then. And he was one of the thousands of heroes, of activists who you never really, heard about. But they were doing things, and that's what he believed in. And he and my mom they were together on it. So this combination of a caring community with leadership and activism really made me who I am today. They taught me leadership at a very young age, and that I had the responsibility to not just lead, but to give back to, it was a reciprocity thing, and it was a responsibility, so that it wasn't about me. It was about what doors I could open, how I can make, what was the impact. And so that led me into my career in nonprofit, working in communities and schools and on various issues and raising lots of money for those causes so that they could come real, and doing that kind of transformative work where families and children could, live and thrive, and we'd have better community.
When it comes to raising money, building those relationships, why is being a red penguin important in that scenario? And how can someone who is a nonprofit, let's say, who is looking to raise funds or just has a startup looking to raise funds, how can they go through the process of becoming a red penguin for that purpose?
Well, I think it's first important to look at what personal branding is. And my definition of personal branding is it's your story with your gifts that you share to get results and create impact. Let's break that down to answer your question. So your story and your gifts. So that means that really, it's not about bragging. And it really
Wait,
isn't
let's stop
about
there because this is the one belief. This is probably one of the beliefs that we have to kind of like take a hammer and crack at over and over again. There are so many people that have done phenomenal things, and then they'll say, but if I share this on social media, I'm being arrogant, I'm bragging. And let's dive into that a little bit, because there's a difference between being arrogant and bragging and not having the receipts, and then just sharing the impact that you truly have made for other people's lives. And the way that I look at it is that we have a responsibility to share that and to become known for the people that we could serve. Because if not, then they'll never have an opportunity to be served by us.
You're absolutely right. And I struggled with this as well, because see, I grew up in the generation where humility was the thing. Your work spoke for itself. And that was what it was about. So I had to get over that. I really did. And really focus on the fact that, well, first of all, if it was true, then it wasn't bragging, it was just the facts. Secondly, if I was working on trying to solve problems for people, then I had a responsibility to do that. And so it was just about that impact. So I very much understand folk who believe or think or have those fears about, it's, you bragging, you just go do what you're supposed to do. And if you do your work and if you're prepared, it'd be good. And then particularly us as women, it seems we get that even more because, add to it, we're supposed to be nice and humble, okay, along with not talking about our stuff. That don't work, because if you don't put yourself out there, particularly in today's time, you're going to be invisible. And particularly for women of color, we can be invisible. And so that's why it's so important, or we can be perceived to be invisible. And so that's why it's important to really get out there. But as we look at what it means, what personal branding is, your story and your gifts. So that's about, what you bring to the table, your strengths and everything that you have that you need to own. You got to own that. I mean, that's about being proud of who you are. And for me, as I thought about all my parents had done and sacrificed for me, all the people in my caring community, everybody who felt that they had a piece of me and whose shoulders I stood on and am still standing on, I owed it to them. It was part of my responsibility to share my story and what my gifts were. So digging deep and finding out what that story and gifts are. And then the second part of that, what personal branding is, your story, your gifts, sharing it, that means you got to speak up. You got to tell it. And that's part of communicating, letting people know. And then the third part of your story, your gifts, sharing it so that you can create results and impact. Well, that's the crux of it. Do you ask yourself, do you want to make money? Do you want a better life for yourself and your family? Do you want to make a difference in your community? Do you want to have joy and success and financial freedom? You got to share your story and your gifts. And you got to think about personal branding in these days and times. So that's how, and so it can be scary, but take a deep breath. And I got some specific strategies you can use right away. But it's so important to start with your story, because that's really what you're telling. And see, for those also, Shanee, I know a lot of people also think that, well, I'm not being authentic and, do I have to create something? Well, no, that's why personal branding is about your story and your gifts. Because if it's about you, you ain't create nothing but the truth. So that puts you automatically in an authentic mode, okay? Because you're focusing on, okay, so what is it that I have to tell? What is it in my experiences and skills and gifts that I'm creating? That's your brand. That's what your brand is.
Dr. Geneva, it sounds to me like one of your gifts is definitely teaching individuals and helping organizations how to raise money. And I want you to maybe elaborate on the importance. What do you think is important in the relationship of an individual or an organization with understanding what money can do for them? Because maybe, and I'm just taking a wild guess, but maybe you were confronted often with individuals who maybe saw money as a source of evil. And if that was the case, how do you help them overcome that misconception?
Yeah, a couple things. One, as I would always tell my staff or people who would come up to me and say, this great dream, and I want to start this organization to help young girls become leaders, or to help rid our community of homelessness, or to start a business that would, employ people. I would always say, oh, I love those dreams. Now you got to finance those dreams. It goes hand in hand. And it doesn't have to be all about the money, but you do need the resources in order to move your dream forward. That's one. But secondly, for, people who come to me and say, well, I just think this money, doing that is evil. I don't want to. It makes me, there's those limiting beliefs. You have to question your relationship with money. And so when I work with clients who feel that way or who have a perspective on money in that way, one of the things that we do straight off is look at those beliefs that perhaps are limiting your potential to not only raise lots of money and acquire the capital to do what you want to do, but also put you in a place that is limiting for you. So we identify those limiting or those fears or those beliefs or those concerns, which are cool for people, got them. We all got them. You identify them. And then you kind of figure out, well, where did they come from? And then rewire your brain for what the new belief is. So that's one of the things we work on, and I work on with people. But I'm going to tell you, Shankar, most of the time, the question when I work with leaders of nonprofits or entrepreneurs is, how do we acquire capital? How do we really do it? And that goes for both nonprofit leaders. And I can tell you, the two top things for a nonprofit leader to do, of course, one is to, move forward that mission. And the second is to raise that money to be able to move forward that mission. Mm-hmm. And so this is having those resources to be able to sustain the work. Because if you can't sustain the work, you can't make the impact. So we have to get along and have a good, healthy relationship with the money. The last thing I'll say about that is that the process of obtaining dollars can be rewarding in itself, because it's really about getting to know people. People give money to people they know and trust. So really, when you're talking about raising money, you're really talking about creating relationships with folk who want to invest in your dream. And that process, so it's not just going up to somebody and say, hey, give me some money, because you ain't going to get it that way. Most likely. But it's a process of establishing relationships, getting to know people, understanding their needs, and finding out how those investor needs can match with your dream and what you want to do. And so oftentimes I tell leaders who are in the space of acquiring capital for a business or a nonprofit that focus your attention on the relationship building part. because that's what's going to really take you to what you do. And in that relationship building part, personal branding matters because it's your story.
I love it. Dr. Geneva, how has building a personal brand changed your life? In just what ways?
No, I was just laughing because it has. I mean, I on one hand, Shanee, I've been in this business 40 plus years, and everything I've done, the relationships I've built, the resources I've raised, the people I've met, the problems I've solved have brought me to this place. And in that process, when I became and I always say late life entrepreneur, because in my late 60s, I decided to stop the dreaming and go ahead and do what I had wanted to do for many years, and that was to start my own business. And in starting my own business, I knew there were going to be some things that I had to do, and one of them was the branding. And I really went through some changes, Shanee. I really did, because what I thought my brand previously was, hey, she's out there, she's an advocate, she's an activist, she's a fundraiser, she's a program development, and she works in nonprofits, and she gives and gives and gives. And we don't pay her nothing directly because, I was getting a check every 2 weeks. Okay. So when I transitioned into a completely new for-profit world where that check don't come every 2 weeks. Okay. And I couldn't just be, doing this, there, and I'm give it, or so I thought. And as I began to craft and understand my business, my new business, and go through this transition, I discovered that, well, wait a minute, I need to still be me, my authentic self. And that's how I need to run my business. And that's because I do believe in that we as leaders all have an influence, and we can turn that influence into impact. I do believe that as entrepreneurs and executives, that being the best that we can be means that we'll hire more people, that we can change the world, that we can change our communities, that we can do better for our families. I do believe that. And I do still believe in reciprocity, and that I need to give. And that's a responsibility. So I began to say, well, I ain't changed, but I spent 2 years thinking that I did, listening to all this and getting all this advice. And I said, I got to change. I got to switch. But really, Shanee, I came right back to, I need to be me, my authentic self, build and leverage my experiences, my relationships, what I've learned, leverage that, be very focused and pick up, you teach and all that good stuff about, management, how you run a business, tips on personal branding, how you leverage yourself, had to get on LinkedIn, do all these new things to add. But at the end of the day, my personal brand had to be me, my story, my gifts, and then go from there.
This is something that I want to tap into, especially on the LinkedIn side, because most people are afraid that LinkedIn is a place where you have to kind of put on a facade, where you have to act super professional, where you can't show up as yourself. So what has been your experience showing up as yourself on LinkedIn? And what would you say to someone who feels a little bit afraid to start doing that?
Yeah, well, I felt afraid and I did it. And I'm in my third act. So I figure anybody who's listening to me, you got a lot going for you. You younger, you got a whole lot of time to, get over your fear. Okay. So we all face challenges when we're stepping into new worlds, new experiences. But that's what helps us grow. So I would say, go on and do it. And what you might want to do is, take that phone. This is what I would take the phone. I would take the phone and I would, talk to it like I was doing a post. Okay. And then I'd play it back. And so I did that for about a week. I would practice and I'd hold it and I'd do it. And then after a while, I said, I sound pretty good, so let me go ahead. And then the thing, though, that really made the breakthrough, Shanee, was I joined your course. I found you. I was watching you for a couple of years and I found you. And when I joined it, I was there. And then when you offered another offer, I said, before you I asked you about your other offer before you offered.
You're like, how do I become a client on day one?
So I say that to say that, as you're going into these new things or trying stuff that you haven't done before, bring yourself to it. And I know that the women that I work with in particular, because I work with leaders, especially female executives and entrepreneurs who are in their midlife. And if you're in your midlife, I know you got stuff with you. You've been through tests and testimonies. You can probably run companies, been in companies, you have families. You have a lot of strengths and experiences. So bring that with you. One of them is probably communication. So use that skill to, get your post and do your post.
Yeah, I want you to share this, Dr. Geneva, because so many women around midlife, including my mom, they have so much to share. They have they have so many stories that they could share, right? Which is the ultimate power of brand. They know who they are as a woman in their lives, but they just the one thing that stops them is oh, but my wrinkles, it's really vanity. What will my colleagues think of me?
Yeah.
The people that I used to work with 10 years ago, especially on LinkedIn. And I see this epidemic happening where they have so much to share with the world. They could change their life in a year if they just showed up, and then it stops them.
Yeah. And that's real. And one of the things that I suggest to folk who have those real deal fears and concerns is that you start with yourself. So if you've got a lot to share, start writing a book or start journaling. If you really want to be a cook, you want to step out of the executive world and become a chef, start cooking. Do it small. Start cooking for yourself, for your family, and then invite a few folks over. And, start in your comfort zone and then begin to step out. Because what happens is when you start in your comfort zone, particularly with people who love you and who are surrounding you, they are going to be telling you how good you are. They're going to be saying that to you. And that can be a confidence booster. And then I say, start small. And then I say, put yourself out there in one thing. And it could take you a month or two to get ready for that one thing. And that's okay. Let's say, staying with the chef, you wanted to be a chef. Maybe you make arrangements to go to your granddaughter's school. Okay. Again, that's not a huge platform. You go to your granddaughter's school and fix lunch, bring in lunch for the day. Again, it's comfortable. It's your granddaughter's school. Probably ain't going to be a lot of folk around there that going to be looking at you saying things. I understand it. Go there. You're going to get, again, a lot of positive feedback and people saying, wow, thank you. And then do something else. And then as you do these little things, Shanee, I think it's always good to come back and reflect on what happened and how did I feel. And if you feel anyway good, then you can do it again and you should be.
Is this something you help women with, go through this kind of reinvention at different phases in their life? And how does it look like to work with you? Where can they reach out? What is the process?
Well, let me just say, I have some fantastic clients. But as you asked me that, I thought about one of my clients who was older. And she came to me and she said, I've done so much in my life. I just don't know what to do now. I can't figure out what I should be doing at this age. So we worked through that. And what we discovered what did you do in the past? We went through the whole process. What turns you on? What are your passions? I take people through some very focused methodologies and I have a framework and, so you'll discover a lot about yourself and how to work on fears and concerns. But then my whole approach is asset-based and abundance-based. So you are going to discover and believe so much about yourself. But as it turned out, in her earlier years, she had helped people learn she'd helped them with accounting. And this was part of what she did. And so she now works with members of her church in helping them with their finances. And she just loves it. And now she's expanded that program to work with young people, teaching them financial literacy. But it all started with her saying, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Can you help me? And so that's the kind of work that I do. She had all the skills and the expertise. I was just there to be a partner with her, a guide, to help her grow, to see her recognize her strengths and her skills and all that, that she does, to help her understand that it's not too late and that you can reinvent and change yourself at any age, at any time, to do whatever you want to. You can, in fact, design the life you love. And so I work with leaders, entrepreneurs, executives to do that, as well as growing their revenue and impact in their organizations. So it's both sides, Shanee, because we may be the baddest executive in the world, but we human. So that means we're going to go through life transitions. We're going to go through changes. We're going to have grandchildren who want this or that, and, changes in how we look and how we feel about. There's going to be life changes, loss of loved ones, moving, there's all those things. And what I do is I work with the whole, leader, yes, and transitions, yes. How do you navigate those transitions, loss of a loved one, when you're running a business? And so, I've had that direct experience, of course, with that and many other things. But 2 months after I decided to finally, start my business after so long, my husband got his first diagnosis of cancer. And then my mom and my dad got sick. And for the next 2 years, while I'm just opening up this business, I became a caregiver that I had no experience in, did not know that I was going to do. And then when they all passed, pretty much within months of each other, that was another thing to go through, never expecting to be in this position of carrying for, and then burying my parents and my husband of 40 years. And all of us go through life transitions. And what I want to do and what I'm obsessed about is helping leaders navigate those transitions and still grow their revenue and impact, so that they can live their best, most vibrant life, but strategically do it, so that that you'll be successful. And one of the things that I've learned, Shanee, after 40 plus decades of doing this work, is the absolute importance of well-being to achieving long-term success. And so people can reach me. I know, see, this is what I had to learn. Well, in a way I had to learn it, but then I don't, I know I'm supposed to say how you can get in touch with me and how you can work with me, which is a new thing for me to do, because again, I'm just obsessed about the work and the mission and reaching people. But ElevateNextLevelSuccess.com is how you can work with me, join my community. We can, talk about things. You can book a strategy session. But I'm also every Wednesday streaming live on various aspects: growth, business and leadership growth, capital acquisition, well-being, balance, work-life harmony, talking about those issues. I have a website, and I'm on all social media platforms at Dr. Geneva Speaks.
I love it. I want to go into how you met your husband a little bit, because I feel like, people don't believe in love at first sight anymore. And I just want them to know it's possible.
Well, my mom wanted me to be a speaker at this conference. At the time, I was working for the Governor's Justice Commission in Philadelphia, working with street gangs and judges and others to try to divert young people from incarceration and provide really great programming for them. And she wanted me to come to speak on that. She was with a national organization in Detroit, by the way. And there was this conference, this big conference in Detroit. And she wanted me to come speak because she was one of the co-chairs of it, what have you. Well, I reluctantly agreed. I had to do, your mom asked you want to do something.
Yeah.
I reluctantly agreed, Shanee, because it was the weekend I was planning to go see somebody else. I was going to see a friend of mine in Minnesota. And so, but I said, that's okay. I'm going to go. I'm going to do this conference for my mom. And then I'm going to catch a flight out from Detroit and go there. So I go to the conference, and there also was this gentleman, this fine, tall, handsome man who was a speaker there as well. He worked for the mayor, and he was coming to speak.
Your mom set you up. She knew.
It's so interesting because she did know my husband's sister, but they didn't know, the connection or whatever have you. But anyway, so we see each other, we connect, we talk. That was on a Wednesday. By that Friday, we were looking at furniture because we had decided we were going to be married. That Saturday, we went over his best friend's mom's house. I'll never forget it. And he told her we were getting married. And of course, nobody believed us. Everybody laughed at us. But we did about 10 months later, and we were married for 40 years. And the only reason we are not together at this moment is because cancer took him over. And so
just having that gift, Dr. Geneva, you're so blessed to have that gift,
absolutely. And when you talk about transitions, that was another one. Me moving to Detroit. I was East Coast girl, and Detroit, different culture, totally, and just really, and then never before really away from my family and friends, coming out married, because I was a young thing, married in my 20s, married, and all of this. Then, I thought I was going to come out, Shanee, and kind of get used to the place and the culture and all that. And one day, soon after I got there, my husband comes in and says, well, when you going to get a job? So I said, oh, one of those. Okay, let's go. And so that really is when I stepped into United Way and started at the very, very bottom and worked my way up to president and CEO at 42, and then began my career and stayed in Detroit, raised my children here, and have had the pleasure to run into and work with and be with so many extraordinary individuals who are trying to make communities better.
I love when people walk their talk, and I always tell everyone, if you want to see results, go to someone who has done that. And you have, and I'm so grateful that you are there, because what you are offering is so needed. There are so many people who are in later stages of their lives and who are questioning, can I still finish the legacy that I want to leave? And the answer, according to you, is a resounding yes. And I am so grateful that these people have someone like you to work with, because again, you've done it, you are still doing it, you are streaming every week, which that alone is something, that a lot of people, no matter what age, they wouldn't know how to go about it. And you are doing that right now. I'm just really happy that you do that for the community. And I know that when we spoke, everything you do is very much driven to give back to the community and to individuals and turn them into the red penguin. And yeah, I think it's amazing. I'm so glad we get this message out today.
And especially in today's culture, Dr. Geneva, where basically people have in their minds, if they haven't built their dream business or their dream life by the time that they turn 30, they act like the culture acts like, their life is over. And people really believe that. That if I don't meet these goals by 30, then I might as well not do anything. So then you have people in their 50s that they do want to do something more legacy based. They want to come into their power because they do know themselves more. But a lot of that, people are going to judge me, or I have to get on video, I have to become that red penguin. A lot of those beliefs have to be worked on, which is why I really am grateful for people like you, because you can't build a brand until you work through all of that first. It's almost impossible if someone comes to me with all of those like compounded beliefs and they're just not willing to get on camera. how can I help them?
Yeah, it's important. And that's why one of the first steps in my process deals with your self-identity, self-awareness, where we not only discover and dive deep in terms of your strengths and your accomplishments and create a legacy map and do all those things, but also really deal with the limiting beliefs and fears that people might have, because they're real deal. And so, but the beauty of it and the joy is that, if you're going to work on yourself, because again, that's what it's about, working on yourself. If you're going to work on yourself and put in the effort, you got to put in the time, you can deal with that. And particularly for folk who are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, because you've worked on so many other things. Okay. You probably you're married or you're in some kind of relationship. You possibly have kids. You might have grandkids. You've been working in probably a variety of different places and spaces. And so that means through all of those transitions and things that you're doing, you've gained experience, wisdom, skills. You've gained all that. And that's one of the things, I'm so glad you said that, because when you're thinking about getting on, LinkedIn or telling you branding, it's about telling your stories, which is what makes you unique.
Exactly. That's what I tell people. I'm
That's
like,
right.
you don't understand, your age is an asset. Like, your experience is an asset, because a 25-year-old, they may have to go to Google and make up some story that never happened to relay a message. But you have real experiences that you just need to share with the camera. But a lot of but I have to do it on video, the technology, the confidence, that's stopping. But they don't realize the gold mine that they have just based on the stories alone.
Well, again, when you do the work, you have to learn some things. So you're going to have to learn how to turn on the camera. You're going to have to learn how to speak in the mic. You're going to have to learn how to do some things. But it be fun, which is part of, Shanee, the reinvention process. It really is, because learning and becoming a lifelong learner and being curious and having that beginner's mindset is part of what you need to do for reinvention. So come on now, for those who, aren't too sure about this, we can learn it together. Okay. But what is priceless? Because see, those are skills. Those are detail. The gold is your story, your experience. That's the goal. And, tell it to yourself first. Like I said, practice, tell it to a mirror, then tell it to your friends, then tell it, what have you, and then begin to try it just once or twice. And, Shanee, before we go, I've got three things I'd like to also, 3 quick actions, if I could, for people for their personal brand. 1, conduct what I call reputation audit. So what you do is you find 5 people that they can be your friends or your work peoples or your social circles, and ask them to describe you in 3 words, to describe what they think your brand is, who you are, in 3 words. Okay. Now, don't go to people who, you don't like or you don't think are going to be giving you the real deal. Okay. Go to some people where you're going to get some real deal, loving, supportive response. So you just ask them to give you 5 words. Okay. And then what this is doing is they're telling you how they perceive you. And you take that, how they perceive you, and match it up with how you perceive yourself. Okay. You're going to find so much information. Now, if there's some gaps or disconnects, maybe that's where you want to pay some attention. Okay. Then secondly, develop this brand, what I call a brand mantra. It's sort of like affirmations, but it's this mantra. It's not a tagline or anything, but it's a concise, like 3 to 5 words that guides your decisions, the decisions you might want to make about your brand. Like mine is elevate, impact, balance, joy. Elevate, impact, balance, joy. And so I say that to myself, as I'm thinking about, well, what video am I going to post, or if I'm going in to meet with a client. And so because relates to my brand. And so it's like a mantra. You just say those words once you've done your audit and you know what 3-4 words to say. Okay. And, elevate, impact, balance, that balance in life, and joy. I am at that stage where I believe that finding and giving joy is like the premium. So that's in my mantra. Yours will be different, but it's something that you say that gives you the spirit and energy. And then finally, this personal branding summit, it's like a concept of where you go away for half a day or, just get yourself into a special place of your house and just lock yourself away for a few hours and you evaluate your personal brand. You think about your presence, your networking strategies, your elevator pitch, how you're going to get over the fear of doing your first live, whatever it is, but you have a summit with yourself where you focus that time to go through that. So I just wanted to drop those 3 things, Shanee, for anyone who's out there kind of, okay, so how do I get started? These are quick things that you can do, quick action.
I'm grateful for people like you and for you being there because quite frankly, it takes away also for someone at my stage in life, it takes away that fear from growing older that is not necessary. You show me that my drive and my entrepreneurship is still valid and will still be there later. And I thank you for that. Really, thank you.
Thank you so much. And yes, we, with the medical advances and technologies, we're going to live much, much longer.
Mm-hmm.
Than our
Where's
parents.
Charles at? Where's Charles?
Yes, right. Charles.
130.
Yeah, Charles is living to 100. He's going to make all of us live to 140.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, we need to prepare for this long haul and it's going to be great. And our mindset, how we approach it is a big factor because we can say, oh, goodness, I'm getting old. I don't know what to do. I'm going to, and see ourselves in this dark, dismal, inactive place. Or we can have the mindset that I'm going to continue to, contribute to myself and to others. I'm going to continue to be a force out there. I'm going to continue to live out my passions. I'm going to continue to live legacy. And I'm going to continue to be vibrant and healthy, which, that whole concept of well-being and putting focus on that now, because the work that we do is stressful. And so the well-being, our being well, has a definite impact on what we're going to do the next 10, 15.
Yeah, maybe in our audio room next week, we'll spend the first 20 minutes on just well-being for high performers because
that would be
critical.
Great.
I couldn't show up the way that I do, at the level our work ethic is at. And it would be impossible if I didn't, eat a certain way, exercise, have a strict routine, and
get others into 75 hard challenges.
Just listen. No, and really force the bedtime, really just take health seriously. I don't know how someone can be a high performer year after year after year and not do that.
Yes.
Well said. Yeah.
Very well said. And again, being in this 4 decades plus, I can just say amen to that, Shanee.
I love it. Everyone connect with Dr. Geneva. We'll see you next week. Pre-register for the live audio event. You won't see us next week, but you'll be able to interact, come to stage, share, ask questions for Dr. Geneva and stuff like that. God bless you. Have a beautiful Monday and ciao.